With Cardinals rumors aplenty and an NL Central manager changing sides, the stove is already red hot. Coming up on B Schaeffer Daily. What's going on, everybody, and welcome in to this edition of B Schaeffer Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you here in the evening hours of Monday, November 6th, 2023. And boy, is that stove heating up. We had an active day across Major League Baseball on Monday. At least it felt that way, with the news that the Chicago Cubs were hiring Craig Counsell to be their manager. Couple of things about that off the top, right on the surface. One, isn't Craig Counsell the manager of the Milwaukee Brewers? Well, he has been for quite a long time, but those rumors have been swirling that he would potentially be looking for a change of scenery this offseason, and the potential that he would even take a year or two away from managing before jumping on with another organization. I think what happened is his market heated up so much, and the dollars made too much sense, if you will, with the various suitors that were after him, including teams who had already employed a manager, which brings us to the other part of the surface level take on the Craig Counsell news. Don't the Cubs have a manager? Yeah, well, they did until the infamous now tweet from Ken Rosenthal Monday morning, a little bit early afternoon on Monday, I guess you'd say. Ken Rosenthal saying the Cubs are hiring Craig Counsell to be their manager, which implied David Ross would be fired because they have already found his replacement. Crazy times in Major League Baseball. So that was going on today. And we'll react to that a little bit, but spend the majority of our time on this episode of B Schaeffer Daily talking about the rumors pertaining to the St. Louis Cardinals. GM meetings are underway. I'm not at them, but we're getting a lot of good reports and nuggets from some of the beat writers that are out there in Arizona, I think is where they're held. I honestly don't know. GM meetings, I've never been to them, but it is something that some of the hardcore beat writers surrounding the team cover because there's availability. You know, John Mozeliak out there talking to the media. Who would have guessed it, right? The fabled end-of-season press conference that never happened. Is it ever going to? Probably not. Could kind of see that from a mile away. And by the way, if they do come back from the GM meetings and decide to hold a press conference once they square away all of their staffing decisions, Yadier Molina stuff, coaching staff, that sort of stuff, whatever. It'll be mid-November by that point. It's exactly the way that we said it would go. They would delay this thing until it honestly felt like it was completely unnecessary to even have it. Hell, there will be MLB winter meetings in Nashville in early December. I am planning on hopefully being able to go and cover those. But the GM meetings, it's instructive this year, if only because there wasn't an availability from John Mozeliak or anybody from the organization following the end of the season. And so this is the first time that publicly people are really getting a chance to hear from him. And so some of the reporters that are there sending out some nuggets, whether via tweet or via various reporting. And so we'll kind of talk about some of the stuff that social media is abuzz about as it pertains to the St. Louis Cardinals after some of the things that John Mozeliak said. So we'll get into that, some reflection and reaction, and then maybe the possibility of a new Twitter series that I can kick off or did maybe kick off earlier on Monday that'll kind of keep going, and I'll explain to you guys what I'm talking about there. You guys enjoy the Twitter polls, or at least you used to, especially when I did Twitter trade polls. Those always got quite a few votes, quite a lot of reaction. I don't do as many of those anymore, and I can explain why for people who may be wondering about that. I used to do them, and then you kind of start to realize, you know, if you include a player that's on the team that you see in the clubhouse and you hope to talk to and have a working relationship with, that guy sees you throwing around his name in a trade poll, that might not be the best for business, and you want to have some respect for the fact that these are human beings as well. And so it might be fun to do the trade polls, but sometimes I only really like to go into it when it's like there are obvious rumors already going on about these players, and maybe we can gauge the interest in that regard compared to, hey, let's just dream up scenarios where you can ship these guys out of town. They might be like, hey, what the hell? So I don't know if maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's sort of my thought process with maybe not as many of those. But in this case, I think it would be fun to do some polls, knowing that the Cardinals need 3 starting pitchers and that John Mozeliak is going to try to make it only be 2, and maybe a depth piece kind of flyer for the third name. We can throw out the trio of starting pitchers that you would be satisfied with if the Cardinals were to end the offseason with that group of players. Today, I think my buddy Zach is the guy that inspired it. He sent me a text, and I thought that's kind of an interesting trio that I wonder what Cardinals fans would say about. And so his grouping was Sonny Gray, Michael Wacha, and Tyler Glasnow. And in my head, and Cardinals fans may not love hearing this, but in my head, I don't know if reality is going to end up any better than what that would be. I do think they signed Sonny Gray. That's my official prediction. Whether it's a 3-year, 4-year deal, not entirely sure. 3 years would be better for the Cardinals, given he's already 34 years old. I think they'll make a run at Tyler Glasnow. We'll talk about some of the reports that are out there about the various pitchers they could be looking at, which is going to leave Cardinals fans, I think, a little bit sensory overload based on the number of names that conceivably the Cardinals are going to be in the mix for. But it makes sense. If you've got 8 or 10 names that you're targeting and you come up with 2 or 3 of them at various levels of cost via free agency or via trade, then that has the potential to be the makings of a really quality offseason. But that's why I think you have to cast a wide net and be willing to pursue a lot of various end roads to see if any of them lead to fixing this rotation. But Sonny Gray, Michael Wacha, Tyler Glasnow, and Glasnow via trade with the Rays owed $20 million on the final year of arbitration eligibility. I feel like Gray, Wacha, Glasnow would, and I would honestly say Glasnow more upside than Wacha. So maybe you would consider Wacha your number 4 and Matt's your number 5. Glasnow your 3. Michael is your 2. Gray your 1. Maybe not a true ace in that bunch, although say that to Sonny Gray's 2022 numbers, or pardon me, 2023 numbers. I almost forgot the year that we're in. Sonny Gray had a fantastic season. I think more than 5 wins above replacement. But people look at his age and say, well, he's 34 years old. How long is he going to continue to pitch at that level? But I think he probably has a willingness to be a Cardinal. He wants to go somewhere where he would be appreciated, is what the line was that he gave. Said it maybe wouldn't be all about money. So if you talk about, I don't know, 3 years, $75 million, 3 years, $70 million, something like that, could that be workable for both sides? I feel like it is a very easy type of deal for the Cardinals to get done because their whole thing is they don't want tons and tons of years on a contract for a starting pitcher, given the risk on the back half of those deals. So I feel like Sonny Gray, very viable. But what do Cardinals fans think of Sonny Gray, Michael Wacha, Tyler Glasnow? And Wacha could be maybe 2-3 year deal. Had some really good numbers, but with all of these guys, especially Wacha and Glasnow, you talk about injury concern. But 67% of Cardinals fans as of this moment, as I'm reading this here, recording at 11 p.m. on Monday, have voted yes, that they would be satisfied with the Cardinals adding that group to fix their rotation. And that's with 2,300 votes in. So a decent amount there. I'm at bschaeffer12 on Twitter. If you guys want to head to my Twitter account and vote in that poll, it'll be open until about 9 p.m. on Tuesday night, November 7th, if you're interested in jumping into the mix there. But I think I'm going to, I sent out a tweet right after that and basically said, give me a trio of names that you think would be interesting. And already a handful of people have done that. So the challenge for Cardinals fans, come up with a trio that you would be satisfied by, but try to aim on the lower end of what that would look like. If you say Jordan Yamamoto, Aaron Nola, and Sonny Gray, then I'll say, all right, I mean, that would be wonderful, but that's $100 million probably between the three, maybe $80-90 million at a minimum. I think it would be fantastic too, but I think realistically, Cardinals probably not going to that level. So if you want, at bschaeffer12 on Twitter, give it a shout and try to join in. We'll do a poll per day. It may be more if the rumors really start to intensify, because I think this Cardinals market, or the general Major League Baseball pitching market, could move pretty quick. And the Cardinals might be part of the reason for that. I'll talk about some of the activity level that we expect of the Cardinals after we just do a quick reaction to the Craig Counsell news, which I thought was really compelling from earlier Monday. But I want to shout out and give a reminder to subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you guys enjoy this type of Cardinals content, where we will be basically on a daily basis, I'm going to give them hell and try to do it every day that I possibly can during the offseason, kind of like I did earlier during the baseball season. If you guys have been following along since April when I started this YouTube channel, I was crushing it, and then the Cardinals weren't, and so I kind of faded off a little bit toward the end. Various obligations of life took over, but it's going to be a massive offseason for the Cardinals, and so I'm not going to leave you guys hanging. At bschaeffer12 on Twitter, but youtube.com/@bschaeffer12 to subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I love you for that. But YouTube is where we will be able to do a lot of very interesting things like the live streams, which I hope to return to action on live streams once the Cardinals make some moves. Get your guys' reactions to some of the things that they do, Because for as many Cardinals fans as are out there saying, oh, I just think it'll be the same old, there's not going to be action, I disagree. I think there's going to have to be action. John Mozeliak knows that. Bill DeWitt knows that. All of these guys involved are aware of that. So I feel like it is going to be an active offseason. As long as my internet provides, as long as my internet doesn't screw us over on it, we will do some live streams. So that's my quick shout out to say get on board. YouTube.com/@BSchaeffer12. If you're listening now on YouTube, just click that subscribe button, click like on this video, and drop your comment below with your opinion on what the Cardinals should be doing or your thoughts on Craig Counsell. Let's get to him first. Woke up this morning, and it was one of those deals where the news began to trickle in ever so slowly until the bombshell, if you will, from Ken Rosenthal came around 11 a.m., 11:30 a.m., whenever it was, that Craig Counsell was heading to the Cubs. And there hadn't been a tweet from anybody saying, like, I don't know, David Ross has been fired by the Cubs. It was, hey, we know that Craig Counsell is going to manage somewhere next year. We know it's not this team, that team, or that team that has a managerial opening. It's going to be a team that already has a manager. And there were like 7 seconds of my life where I thought, would the Cardinals? No. And then I kind of dismissed it. I honestly was pretty sure Yankees was going to be the bombshell, but that didn't end up happening either. It was even more shocking than that. The Chicago Cubs parting ways with David Ross, bringing in Craig Counsell. Obviously a familiarity with Counsell from his time. He's been with the Brewers for like a decade, it seems. I don't know the exact year, and I'm not going to look it up that he got there, but it's been a long time. And I think he just wanted a change of scenery. And in the statement released by his agent, who I guess is a Chicago guy as well, he had a little note in there about being satisfied that teams are starting to recognize the value of a big league manager and having a good one, which says to me, money bags. Craig Counsell getting paid. And I think that is an interesting aspect, that if you're a team that's trying to make your way back into contention, and I think the Cubs are going to be ready to spend on player personnel, do you value having someone in that dugout, on that bench, making decisions in game that knows what he's doing and that you feel like can galvanize the troops and be good in the clubhouse? What is the role of a major league manager? I think there are different schools of thought as to how much the manager matters. I think that in terms of setting the culture, he does matter, and you want a guy that's bought in from the top down. You talk about philosophical differences, and love Mike Schilt. Hope he gets the Padres job. There's rumors about that swirling as we record here on Monday night. But I do think it's important to have that synergy. I also think, though, you got to have a guy that doesn't have a huge ego and like knows how to have his finger on the pulse of making managerial decisions in game, but also know the blend of, yes, you want to have analytics influence those decisions, but also be able to incorporate them in a way that makes sense in game and be able to explain them to your players in a way that they buy in. And so I think that does take a tactician, sure, but somebody that doesn't just move the chess pieces around, and he's got buy-in from his guys. And Craig Counsell, in terms of around the game, the way that people talk about him and think about him as a manager, very highly respected. So I feel like he was not really a free agent because he was with the Brewers, but he was highly sought once it became clear that he was potentially on the move. And it's really interesting if you're the Cubs and you say, David Ross has been a fine manager. We've enjoyed having him, but we feel like this guy's better, and we're going to have to burn a bridge to make this happen, and it's going to be a little bit ugly and kind of gnarly for a day or two because David Ross is a Cubs legend, part of that 2016 World Championship team. People are going to be upset, but at the same time, we feel like it's the best move for our organization moving forward. You bite the bullet and you make the move, and I think that's what the Cubs did today. And to me, I know they paid him a lot of money because there was a bidding war. So what that tells me is Chicago Cubs are ready to spend. I would be surprised if they don't get Cody Bellinger back on an extension. I would be surprised if they don't sign a marquee free agent starting pitcher to replace Marcus Stroman, who declined his option, and the Cubs really did not make a pursuit of him to bring him back in any capacity. Cardinals fans think they're maybe getting Aaron Nola. Cubs could be getting Aaron Nola. That's absolutely a possibility. If not Nola, somebody else. I think they are going to make moves, and I think they're going to spend. So we'll be interested to see if the Cardinals end up rivaling the Cubs in terms of the free agent market for some of the acquisitions they're hoping to make. But I think Craig Counsell, whatever you think of him, he's still in the NL Central. So if you thought you were getting rid of him, Cardinals fans, you were wrong. Not only is he not leaving the division, he's going to your most bitter rival. So there is that to consider. But let's get into some Cardinals-centric talk from today as the GM meetings kicked off. Got a lot of different things to talk about, and there was one tweet from John Denton that I think I want to start there because a lot of folks were certainly kind of bandying this about on Twitter. Here's the tweet. Pobo John Mozeliak on his club spending and free agency for pitching. Quote, I think we have to be prudent on how we think through some of this, but he says, I definitely think the type of payroll we were going to have last year before trades will look very similar this year. And a lot of people took that to mean, oh no, here we go again. That is a Demi Lovato reference, I think, that I just pulled out from mid-2000s. Anyway, that was the initial tweet that a lot of people were reading, and you think, oh, John Mozeliak is talking, for one, that's great, but it was clear, John Denton, they're in whatever area they're doing these meetings, I still don't know, along with some of the beat writers, and John Denton trying to get some information out there just tweets this quote, but it obviously does lack some context, and a lot of folks bringing in some context, which I believe Derek Gould was doing his chat for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch for STL Today, which is a great read. He's going to have more insight info packed in there than I am going to, share here, because I'm kind of reacting in this podcast to some of the stuff that he said today because it was all over social media. So we want to kind of pick through and see what we think about what's going on from the Cardinals' perspective. And basically, when you say payroll is going to look like kind of what it did last year, people are thinking, well, it barely went up last year. It did go up. Mozeliak said it was going to go up. It went up a little bit, but it didn't hit that $200 million mark like they kind of thought maybe they could approach that. They had the bandwidth to approach that, but they traded away a lot of guys at the deadline. So at the end of the day, you end up at a lower number. I don't know if it was $178 million, something like that, I believe, based on what Fangraphs has. And again, when you look at various places to find the payroll information, it's not just so straightforward. SpotTrack evidently doesn't account it in as accurate of a way. We all have to understand that the Cardinals aren't releasing these books, and so it's all really kind of an estimate. And you might have one situation where you say, well, this is our payroll, but that's our 26-man payroll, and we've also got the 40-man. We've also got guys on, 60-day injured list, but they're getting paid this, and guys who spent it does fluctuate based on moves that are made. Someone might be traded, but they might not be reported or evident to a reader in a various report that, oh, that trade did include this cash or this allocation. And so it's just not perfect. And if anybody out there knows the perfect way to do it, that's great for you. I don't, and I'm accepting of that. I think if fans just get into the mindset of it's okay to speculate a little bit, but understand that you don't have the perfect numbers, so let's not get all frustrated about it if it's not exactly what we thought it was going to be. And if there's somebody out there, I know Derek Gould does a great job of trying to pin that down, and he writes about it, but some people might not subscribe to the Post-Dispatches, so they might not read that. And my point is, whatever the case might be on payroll stuff, it's okay to know that we don't know everything and to calm down a little bit because payroll is always ends up being a really heated topic of conversation for people. And it's a hard one to pin down. And so that's a bad combination where people get really animated and excited about something that we also may not have the best information on unless you know where to look for it. So Fangraphs, though, from what I understand, Roster Resource does the best job. So check that out if you have any payroll-related inquiries, rather than SpotTrack is what I've been told by people who know more than me. So that's my little PSA. But basically, had they not traded guys away, and this is from Derek Gould's chat, that they're putting that out there on Twitter, and it's good information to have. So we want you to have the good information that Derek put out there, and said had they kept the team together and added the deadline instead of subtracting, that would have been around what they expected to have in terms of bandwidth to nudge up to that $200 million mark, which they obviously didn't really come too close to doing. But based on that, depending on the projections that you read, obviously it's going to be in flux, because if they've got a guy projected to make $4 or $5 million in arbitration, like Tyler O'Neill or Dakota Hudson, and the Cardinals decide to cut that player, non-tender that player, trade that player, that is all going to be in flux and it'll change. But I believe they're in that 150-ish million range, give or take 5 to 10 million. Again, it's in flux. But what that would say is, 50 million, maybe as much as 60 million to be able to manipulate and work with as it pertains to this offseason. And that would mean being able to add. So for those who read the John Denton tweet and thought, oh my gosh, that's bad news, I think John was just presenting a quote, and it kind of was once you send it out there onto Twitter, it's taken in various directions. I think John would have liked to, if he had it to do over again, maybe put some more context out there. But I know how it is out there. You're covering something. You have the audio. You've got to write a story. Just in John's defense, because I know a lot of people were kind of going after him a little bit. You've got a lot of balls in the air, stuff you're trying to juggle, and he doesn't work for Twitter. He does work for MLB, so he's trying to probably write whatever articles he needs to make sure to get up on their website, and thought, people would like to see this tweet, so I'm putting it out there. If you're going after John, come on. I don't think he had ill intent, but I get it. The context is really important to that. So Twitterers were doing a great job of getting that context out there. Derek Gould was doing a great job of putting a lot of detailed information into his chat. And so we're going to, again, direct you to read the chat because he's out there, boots on the ground, doing a lot of great work. But a lot of folks on Twitter were talking about what was going on. And the sheer volume of names, honestly, flying around as it pertains to the Cardinals and what they could go for is what is, I guess, the most, I don't know about alarming, but just like very compelling to me, because there's a lot of pitchers out there, and it seems like the Cardinals might be in on a ton of them. And again, STL Today is where Derek Gould does his chat, but he was being asked about all the names and basically saying, yeah, Cardinals are checking in on this guy. This guy's on their list. They're going to try to go as far with Yoshi Yamamoto as they possibly can. They'd like to approach Jordan Montgomery about a return. Like, that's on the record stuff the Cardinals have said. Derek reporting that Aaron Nola and Sonny Gray are hiring on their list as well. They want to check in with Blake Snell to see, would you like to be a Cardinal? Can we come up with a dollars and cents that work for both sides? Trade market, Dylan Cease, yeah, they'll check in. Logan Gilbert, of course, of Seattle, they'd like to check in on him, but it's going to be a high cost. And the one that I can remember going back into midsummer thinking, if the Tampa Bay Rays decide they don't want to pay Tyler Glasnow the $20 million plus that he's owed for 2024 via, I think it's either arbitration or he's already inked that deal and it's set in stone. That's something that I can probably find out. But if that's the case, man, I thought that would be perfect because they would have the incentive to trade the guy based on not wanting to pay him. And yeah, he is signed through 2024, so that is set in stone. It wouldn't be an ARB hearing. It would just be the $20 million or whatever it is that he's owed. So that's nice and simple and cut and dry and sweet. It says $25 million on Baseball Reference. Derek put $20 million in his chat. Again, part of that might have been signing bonus and stuff. So when you see salary stuff, you could go to Baseball Reference and go, oh, it's $25 million. It's not always fully allocated, and that's why I say just take some of that with a grain of salt because different ways of allocating cash are sometimes lost in translation there. But Glasnow, Derek says, is somebody that they'd be interested on if the Rays decide to entertain offers for him. And I have speculated on what that could look like dating back to the summer. Like you go back on B-Shape Daily. This matches up with what we've been kind of wondering, speculating about if it would make sense for the Cardinals. Because to me, you were never going to sign three marquee free agent starting pitchers. You could sign a Sonny Gray and like a Michael Wacha, right? You could sign an Aaron Nola and a Michael Wacha. Could you sign a Nola and a Gray? Probably not. You should. They should. But based on the parameters that we're hearing about, payroll's going to be about what we thought we could do last year, which nudges up to $200 million. Ultimately didn't do it because didn't have the team to buy at the deadline. Instead, sold off, which actually saved you some cash, and so it went the other way. But if that's the case, couldn't you just sign them both? But let's just assume that it's going to be a little more measured than that, because when the 67% of the voters in that poll where I said, hey, Gray, Wacha, Glasnow, you satisfied by that? When 67% said yes, there were a few commenters who said, nope, that's not good enough. And I said, I have news. I don't think it's going to be any better than this. Like reality, I don't think it's going to beat this hypothetical. But that also comes from a place of I'm pretty high on Glasnow as a flyer that you trade for him and you don't have to give a ton in talent to get him because the reason they trade him is because they don't want to pay him. So there's incentive there. Now, are there other MLB teams that would say, I'll pay $20 million to Glasnow and I'll give you a better prospect or a better package to get him? Certainly possible. But the Cardinals have always been able to kind of slither into these areas where they feel like they're willing to do something that a lot of other teams aren't. And the Cardinals may just be desperate enough to say, yeah, Tyler Glasnow, with all the upside that he possesses is intriguing. And the reason that we're willing to kind of overlook the history of injury with him is because we basically have to find a way to get an ace caliber arm or two into this rotation without doing too much of the sticker shock and market value payments for those players in this offseason, because we just, you buy a full rotation, there's a lot of risk that is assumed there if you're paying sticker price on all that. He had 120 innings this past year, which is the most he's ever had in his career. Every other year has been less. Every other year has been injury-riddled. That has been the story of Tyler Glasnow. 21 starts, 120 innings, about 6 innings per start, which is pretty good by modern standards. And 3.53 was the ERA, 162 strikeouts. 162 strikeouts in 120 innings. That's what you salivate over. I think it makes sense if you say, hey, we're getting Aaron Nola, we're getting Glasnow, and we're going to sign Seth Lugo or Michael Wacha or whatever. And I say Nola, it'll probably be Sonny Gray, if I had to guess. More attainable just due to the age, less length of the contract. But if you do those things, you have a shot at a couple of guys who can pitch like an ace in 2024. And you might say, well, you don't want to give up the farm because Glasnow probably going to miss half the year with injury, and he's not under contract. But I would make the case that if you're worried about Tyler Glasnow's injury history, the fact that he's not under contract is a feature, not a bug. It's a benefit, because without being team controlled, the Rays know they cannot ask the world for a pitcher that is injury riddled, that is owed $20 million, that has only ever thrown 120 innings, and he just did it. So is the next injury turning around and going to happen right away? Not fair. None of this is fair to Tyler Glasnow in the way we're describing him, because he's a commodity, he's an asset, he's a talented baseball player that the Cardinals, I think, should want. But we do have to kind of discuss the risks associated with, hey, we're going to pay this guy $20 million, and we have to give up assets to get him. But I do think that depresses the price the Rays can ask for. But the Rays, smart front office, savvy dudes over there, they're going to know what to ask for, right? And so that makes Cardinals fans uneasy from the jump. It's like, oh, they're going to give you damaged goods for your next Arozarena. Perfect. But I do think that there's a world in which it could benefit the Cardinals. And again, I talked about the trade polls and not liking to speculate on guys that would be traded. I look at Alec Burleson and say, would the Rays have interest in him? Absolutely. Historically, based on what they value, I should think so. From a hitting perspective, he fits beautifully with a platoon-oriented lineup. Left-handed guy who I think can come into some power and has great contact, bat-to-ball skills. Should make all the sense in the world, and he's controllable for 5 years. You describe him that way, and it's like, well, why would the Cardinals give him up for a guy that, cost controlled for 5 years, guy that they don't have to pay, and he's great depth offensively, can play a little corner outfield, can play first base if Goldschmidt should get hurt or should decline, whatever. That's the kind of guy you probably want to have around. Noted, but also he's going on 25 years old. Do you have any room or intention to have room for him in your corner outfield? Or is it going to be Nootbaar in one corner, Jordan Walker in the other corner, figuring out center field, whether it's Tommy, whether it's going and getting somebody, whether it's Dylan, whatever that ends up being? Do you have the ability to allocate spot to Burleson next year? Are you comfortable with the idea that no, you don't, but you figure he'll get chances based on injury? That because you do have to balance depth with, do we need this player? If it's Alec Burleson for Tyler Glasnow, you can see the benefit where the Cardinals go, look, is he the next Arozarena? Maybe, at least offensively. We know he's not necessarily that guy defensively in the corner outfield. Is that going to be the case? Maybe. They'll have him for 5 years. They might. He's American League team. We don't have to really see him that often. And Glasnow is a way to get better in the rotation on paper while not having long-term risk tied to a bad deal. Because if we do make this deal and we lose Burleson, maybe a low-level or a mid-range kind of pitching prospect, because the Rays say, well, look, we like this Burleson kid, but we need a pitcher. We're giving you an instant rotation guy. You trade Burleson and Liberatore? they don't want Liberatore. That was a little facetious. They already gave him to you the first time. I know. But you get the drift, right? I think Graceffo, much too high of a name to be talking about, because the Cardinals have to hope that some of these pitching prospects in their AAA ascend to be able to pitch in the big leagues. And that's something that Mozeliak talked about today when it comes to the whole 3 starters thing. He kind of went back on, not to say he went back on it necessarily, but sort of circled the drain more on the notion that, It's hard to get 3. Going to try to find the exact quote for you guys, but to do it, you got to be a little bit creative. And if there's a player that has pure ace upside, which Tyler Glass now does, and you can get him without sacrificing from your major league team from your starting lineup, maybe that's something that you consider. But do the Cardinals consider that an overpay to say 5 years of Burleson is a guy that we like, cost controlled for a guy that might get hurt and we only would have for a year? Do the Cardinals say we don't do that deal? Or do the Rays say we don't do that deal? We're not getting any pitching for our ace pitcher who had his best career year this past year, the healthiest he's ever been. Like, I don't know. I hesitate to do the trade poll thing because it's tough to know what both sides or either side, honestly, would value. But we can just talk about it from like a surface level. What would it make sense for both teams to want without like needing to say, well, this report says the Rays don't like. Okay, whatever. We got what we got here, and we don't get insight to all these rooms, all these phone calls that take place. So I'm going to just trust that people know that we're dealing in, we're not reporting that this is a trade that Alec Burleson, but we're dot connecting, which is what this space is for. More so than if I were doing it in an article or something. We're talking. I think it would be interesting because you look at Burleson as maybe superfluous to the Cardinals lineup if the Rays would want to move on from Glass now. People would say, what about Tommy Edman? I think the Cardinals really like Tommy Edman and have reason to do so. I think that would be a for sure overpay to go Edman for Glass now. I don't think the Cardinals do that trade, nor do I necessarily recommend that they should. However, if you're like, oh, well, this is a trade they're going to do, knowing that they're going to make a play for, and I don't know which free agent outfielders make a lot of sense. I think Kiermaier might be out there, but he's basically Tommy Edman. So why would you, if you want defense first, not a great hitter, but brings a little bit of pizzazz offensively, Tommy Edman, you've already got him and he steals 30 bases, so that's enjoyable. But if there's like a Cody Bellinger equivalent, which I don't think there is, I think he's the one and he's going to stay with the Cubs. But if there's a guy who can play great defensive center field and also give you 800 OPS or better, and if he's left-handed, it's a bonus, then you could say, well, if we're doing that, it's on the aggregate, we're going to get better because we're also going to sign this other player or trade for this other player that we believe can fill the outfield spot. And maybe they think Tyler O'Neill can do that. I don't think they think that. I don't think he'll be on this team. Maybe they think Dylan can do that. I don't know that they do. It depends on who they would be in the organization. I think there's hope from Ollie Marmol to say he's high on Dylan. He's been very clear about that. How does everybody else feel? What are they going to do with Dylan? Would they trade him? I think they would, but is it a matter of admitting that you're selling low on a guy that you think could then turn it around? What's the appetite to do that when you do know that depth is important? Like, these are all the questions they've got to ask, and they've got to come to a decision on stay or go, Tyler O'Neill. Stay or go, Dylan Carlson. Stay or go, Alec Burleson, not because of anything he's done wrong, but because he might be more valuable to the team in a trade. Like, these are the kinds of things that they'll have to be thinking about. And I do think the trade market is going to have to be part of it. But as Derek said in his chat, we talk about Glass now, I think makes a lot of sense. Dylan Cease, would the White Sox trade him? That'll probably be more costly because he's got years of control. I think Seattle, if you're doing the Logan Gilbert thing, it would be only because they're getting a big fish like Nolan Gorman or Brendan Donovan. And people call me crazy. I would not trade Brendan Donovan. I'm not saying I would advocate for trading Nolan Gorman, but if I had to pick, I think I would keep Brendan Donovan protected because I think he's going to be worth more to you than he is in a trade. I think Gorman could be very valuable in a trade because people are going to pay market price for the promise of 40 home runs in a season from a left-handed slugger who plays pretty competent second base and could also play third for you. Is the market going to value the on-base, the grittiness, the team leadership of Brendan Donovan? I think you're losing more than you're getting back in that trade. But if it's Donovan for Gilbert straight up, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it would be. Would it be Gorman for Gilbert straight up? I don't know. We don't know what the Mariners would want. They would have a huge asking price on Gilbert. That makes sense. It also makes sense for them to be interested. Derek putting in there that the Cardinals want to see how far they can go in negotiations for Yamamoto, which, sure. Why wouldn't you? We know that Nootbaar and Arenado were there kind of checking him out and hanging out. Makes sense. I'm not sure the Cardinals are going to be there. Not if it's 200 plus million. I think it would be great. He's 25 years old. That would be a splash for sure. And then you would be able to add around that, but would you be okay with it saying, hey, we know that we're going to have a payroll elevated for 1 year, and maybe it hits 210. Maybe it goes above 200 million, which I'm not saying is even possible. It is if they want to do it, if Bill DeWitt wants to do it. But would he be willing to do it with the understanding that in 2025 it's actually going to drop back down to 190? And how would that happen? Well, Tyler Glasnow, 20 million off the books. Let's say they make a bunch of moves and they're at 210. They sign Nola or Yamamoto. They sign somebody else. I don't know if you could do. You couldn't. What I would do is Yamamoto or Nola, Gray, and Glasnow. That's what I would do. I would say screw the payroll. It's 210. Suck it up. But it's only for a year because when Glasnow departs from free agency, whether he panned out or not, you can't re-sign him because you've made too many other commitments to pitchers. That's okay though, because one, I think you get a comp pick, right? I believe if he spends the whole year with the Cardinals. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's right. But the main thing is, all right, Mozeliak talking about internal options. And let me find the quote from John Denton because this was something that I thought was certainly relevant. JD on his Twitter, and he's at John Denton 555 for those who want to follow, want to give credit where, again, this podcast, we're kind of talking about other people's reports, so we want to make sure we give credit for that. When asked if he still wanted to add 3 starting pitchers via trades or free agents, Mozeliak said this, quote, I think we definitely need to try and find 2, and then maybe we find someone that can maybe split roles or something, which could be like a swingman, a Seth Lugo type, and maybe less expensive than that. I don't know all of the names that are out there and available, but that's the thought process. Someone that can be a reliever, but if you needed to shove him in the rotation, he'd be able to do it. And it would be a little more reliable than asking Zach Thompson all of a sudden to do that or asking Liberatore to bounce back and forth, that sort of thing. But then Mozeliak continues. It'd be great if one of our younger pitchers could actually step in and pitch meaningful innings too throughout the year. So when you think about guys like McGreevy, Graceffo, Thompson, where they will be physically and mentally next year, what if they learn to help them prepare for next year? Liberatore, I thought out of the bullpen, he was really good. I'm sure his desire, though, is going to be come out and start. So balancing what the players themselves want, what the team's going to need, and coming up with a nice stew, nice little chili that makes all of that make sense for the St. Louis Cardinals in 2024. And I'm telling you what, they better be telling all those guys to prepare as starters because you can always dial it back. You cannot ramp it up. We saw that with Zach Thompson. It was really, really difficult for the summer months for him to go from not built up at all to, hey, we want you to start. And it was not entirely fair to him, but that's the direction that it went. So hopefully they're on top of the plans for what they want to do with these guys this time around. But I think really interesting and something we should be paying attention to that he says, can we get 2? And then kind of see about the third, and maybe the third is a guy that could be a swingman. That's coming from John Mozeliak. That's him continuing the trend of walking back the initial comment of 3 starters, right? It feels really good in August when people are demanding you to be active in the winter months ahead, and you go, everybody calm down, we're going to get 3 starters. I know, we need it, it's fine. But then you later are like, yeah, come on. You guys knew I meant 2 and a swingman, right? Like, come on, Mo. Why say it in the first place unless you want the credit for it, but you have no intention on following through? And it's not even to say he doesn't have intention on following through, but it's easy to say it, and then when you get to the winter, everybody had this reaction at the time, like, Mo, you realize you did say 3 starters. That's kind of a lot. That's why everybody the last day of the season asking Ollie Marmol, hey, are you guys all on the same page about the whole 3 starters thing? And quote, that's what's needed. Ollie Marmol said it 15 damn times, and he was right every time he said it. That's what's needed. We all know what's needed. So to me, and I think Ollie's 100% correct. I think Mo probably knows that they need 3 too, but he also knows that's hard to do. Probably wishes he didn't say it in the first place, but again, I think he wanted the credit for saying it in the first place because it would get people off his back for a damn minute. And that's a human emotion, right? That's human nature to want to say what people want to hear and then later go, all right, can I actually make this happen? Now, I think he can. I think he's got support from ownership too. Again, that's why in Derek's chat, which, people are screenshotting the chat, you should subscribe and check out the chat so you get all the information But Matt Thompson, I think, had the screenshot that a lot of people were pointing to. A number of people have tweeted it out at this point. But literally in this little segment from his chat, from Derek's chat, like a dozen names almost. Whether it's starters for, I think he even mentioned Yuki Matsui. We did a podcast on him the other week. I think the Cardinals probably do sign Yuki Matsui. Do they sign Jordan Hicks? I don't know. Who are they going to sign relief-wise? They'll probably get somebody, maybe a couple of bodies. But then on the starter front, I think that's obviously the big question of how aggressive will they be. But the fact that there's like a dozen names that you could think realistically are going to be at least in play, are all of those equal opportunity? Like, hey, if we get the top one on our list financially, can we afford the number two? Or do we have to bump down to, all right, we got Nola or Yamamoto, so that means we're out on Gray, and we have to kind of cut ourselves off at Montgomery, or we can't get Montgomery, we have to cut ourselves off at whatever. Can we get Blake Snell? And I think they need to be willing to get two of the big guns. And to me, why Glasnow is so appealing is because you can get extra credit at that point. You can get a third ace. Like I don't know what Snell's going to cost. And I don't think Montgomery is realistic. That's just a gut feeling. They would like him. Would he like to be back? Maybe. I don't know. Let's just say personal feelings, whatever they are, that a pitcher of Montgomery's caliber and Snell's caliber, they can afford them both and they sign them both. Now you go get Glasnow because he's gravy. And now you have a legitimate contending rotation. I'll start rattling off the names. Nola, Sonny Gray, and this is in no particular order, but these are the ones that I would say, if you get two of these guys, add Glasnow to that, you're cooking with gas. Nola, Sonny Gray, Yamamoto, Jordan Montgomery, Blake Snell, and then in the trade market that are controllable names, Dylan Cease, Logan Gilbert. That's probably about where I stop. Let me know, YouTube commenters, if I'm missing a name of like a true workhorse stud. You're going to be able to rely upon this guy. And I didn't say his name just now. Because I was thinking, will I say Giolito? Nah, not quite. But Giolito would be great from the tier below, because you maybe get him on a pillow deal, or you maybe get him for a cheaper AAV on a 4 or 5 year deal than you otherwise would have, because he underperformed this year. But the upside is there for him to be great. That's how I feel about Glasnow, is the upside's there for him to be great in 2024, and you're okay with letting him walk under the promise of it's 1 year of bloating the payroll beyond the comfort zone of Bill DeWitt, but knowing that by then, one of those Zach Thompsons, McGreevy's, that whole bucket of humans, one of them needs to be your number 5 by April 2025. And at that point, it's up to your own pitching development to have developed one of those dudes, Graceffo, McGreevy, there's other guys, Zach Thompson, one of them, Liberatore, one of them's got to be able to be your day one number 5. But because of how bad 2023 was, you cannot afford to have one of them be your day one number 5 on February 12th or whenever spring training starts with pitchers and catchers report. You need that group to be vying for the number 6 spot, because I'm telling you, by April 1st, they'll still be your number 5. But if you act like they're going to be your number 5, they'll be your number 4 and your number 3 by June. And that's when you're screwed. And by August, you're saying, well, we just didn't have the depth this year. You have the ability to prevent that. And then there's going to be a question of, okay, swingman, is that Seth Lugo? Who is the guy that they can sign? Because now you're saying, we're going to pay somebody. When Mo says, I think we could get 2 and then maybe a split roll, when you go get the split roll guy, what that means is he's going to cost $4 or $5 million or whatever in that range. And we don't know if he's going to be any good. You have to evaluate. You have to get it right. And that's true when you spend a bunch of money. You have to obviously get those right. But injuries can sometimes tank it, and there ain't shit you can do about it. Right? Pardon my French. Injuries can sometimes tank that decision. You thought it was a good choice, ends up being a bad contract, and there's nothing you can do if a guy gets hurt. But when you're spending in that $5 million bucket and you're basically saying, that's the third guy we're getting somebody on a 2-year, $11 million deal just for the protection, that guy's got to be able to give you quality innings as a legit number 5. And that's not saying a lot, but it is saying enough when you look at last year's team and realize they didn't have a lot of that. They were starving for innings that were quality. And that's going to be what it boils down to, is how much you trust the depth that you have. It's very fascinating. It's compelling. I think we can know from these quotes that they're not getting 3, but would they get 2? And is it equal opportunity? They can get any 2 they want and then try to be selective in that bargain bin for the swing man. Would you rather that be the case, Cardinals fans? They get 2 of Nola, Gray, Yamamoto. I'm talking the big guns. Blake Snell. Or would I'm trying to think of the other free agents that I missed. Jordan Montgomery should be in that category. Or would you rather they get one big one? They get their Nola or their Gray or their, heaven forbid, Yamamoto. I just don't think they're going to spend up like they should on Yamamoto. And the reason you do that is because he's 25. Who cares if it's a 7-year deal? He's in his prime the whole time. Yes, do you lose $30 million one year because he doesn't pitch because of TJ? Yeah, but that's true of anybody. So I'd rather do it with a prime 25-year-old than a guy that's 32 and sign him to a 6-year deal, Aaron Nola, and say, well, he might also miss a year for TJ, and he's going to be 36 for the other year, so he might not be very good anymore. To me, sign the younger player. The Cardinals have always done the opposite of that because they think they're getting a better deal. They think they're not competing at the high end of that market. I think they need to readjust. They need to change their view on how they do that. But that's not really, for me to decide. We'll see what they decide to do. Clearly, they're interested in Yamamoto, so they understand that part of it, that hey, having a 25-year-old stud that honestly the market may undervalue because they've never seen him. There's a chance they're overvaluing him. It could go the other way, though. There's variance when it comes to these pitchers coming from Japan, and we have a decent idea of how they're going to acclimate, how we think they'll acclimate, but there's variance. You could also get a bargain for a guy that you're paying $200 million to. I know that's crazy, but I think it's possible that he could be one of those guys that's worth every penny if you were to go in on him. But would you rather the Cardinals get one anchor and then have the secondary guy be more of a Waka level pay, Giolito level pay, and then you do make a more, let's say, pronounced trade or a more high-profile trade by getting a Dylan Cease or a, heaven forbid, a Logan Gilbert? That's going to cost you. Dylan Cease, you might be able to pry without giving up the Donovan or Gorman. I don't think it's possible to do for Logan Gilbert without giving up one of those two. But would you rather them go that route? And it's like, okay, they're spreading their wealth a little bit, and maybe they trade for Glasnow. Maybe it's Glasnow, Sonny Gray, and Waka, which is kind of what I was talking about. Or would you rather them go, Giolito would be interesting too in that Waka spot. Or would you rather them go one big gun, Aaron Nola or Yamamoto? And for some people, they would say Gray should be in that category. Other people would say, no, he's too old. We need to know that they're going to have a guy for 5 years that's the front-end workhorse. Okay, whatever. I don't need to debate that part for this hypothetical. They get one of those big guns like an Aaron Nola. They get a secondary big gun like a Sonny Gray or a Blake Snell or a Jordan Montgomery, but the third guy is imaginary. You're punting that fifth spot and saying, we're going to get a guy that's can give us some innings if one of our young guys doesn't pan out. Which would you rather have, Cardinals fans? And if I'm not making sense with this question because it's midnight and I'm just talking, then tell me that too in the YouTube comments section below. I talked for way longer than I intended to. I want to try to make these YouTube videos closer to 30 minutes than 50 because I feel like they're more consumable that way. The podcast can be as long as I want them to be on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, but I try for the YouTube to cut it down a little bit because I don't want to not keep your attention. But if you think this is interesting, give me my flowers a little bit at the end and say, no, Brenden, we do like the long stuff. We're fine with it. We just want Cardinals content, if that's how you feel. If you're like, shut up, you've talked for an hour, you can tell me that. I'll try not to get sad. But let me know what you think, Cardinals fans, in the YouTube comments section below. We spent this whole damn podcast without talking about Chaim Bloom, the potential heir to John Mozeliak, ? In St. Louis. Peter Gaiman's reporting that Bloom, the former Pobo of the Boston Red Sox, got fired, maybe coming on. Cardinals may be looking to hire him. Mo was asked about that and didn't say specifically as to Bloom whether that was in the works or not, but did say that, they're looking to maybe add an outside perspective. But if you add a guy like Bloom in an advisory role, and he has a background with the Tampa Bay Rays before going to Boston, Cardinals are looking to beef up their pitching direction from an organizational standpoint, analytically, Modernize the approach. That's the word. That's the reporting that's being done. Peter Gammons had mentioned Bloom as a possibility for the Cardinals, and nobody else has heard it. Nobody knows anything about it yet. I think it would be a smash, and it would mean that Bloom would be running the St. Louis Cardinals as the Pobo in 2 years. That's speculative, but that's informed speculative, because it would make so much sense that if he wants a couple years off that are a little more hands-off after running the Red Sox and not getting really rewarded for it, and they fire him, and you maybe just need to recharge your battery, spend some time with family, that sort of stuff. I could see the Cardinals telling him, hey, look, Mo's contract is through 2025. Come on as an advisor, so you're at least kind of hand is in the cookie jar on what this is going to look like, and it's your ship to run in 2 years. I think that would be a smash if the Cardinals would get that done. We don't even know if they're hiring him, though. We'll do more videos and podcasts on this topic if any more comes to light about it, but that was the report from Peter Gammons. So we'll see. What would you think about Bloom coming to the Cardinals in an advisory role? I think he knows his pitching, and that's something that this organization does need to modernize on. So that's what I got for this edition of B Shafe Daily. That's what I got for this video. Subscribe to the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you would be so kind. YouTube.com/@BShafer12. Click subscribe, click like, and get those comments in. It's going to be a pitching-filled offseason. Excited that we're just scratching the surface and talking about it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B Shafe Daily. Peace.